Housekeeping. Jerry said he's not that he doesn't like all of you. It's that he can't hear when he's here. His deafness is so profound in this environment. It's too hard for him to hear. And he is leaving today for Colorado. He will be baptizing a couple of our students tomorrow out at Camp Colorado. And they will film that, and then we will broadcast that when we get it all worked in. So safe travels to Jerry. He's on his way. Janice is out of the office this week, so leave a message. If you don't get Janice directly, I'll be checking emails, and taking a week of vacation. Upper rooms came in. Chris is delivering to everybody in the healthcare center and the assisted living so that they get their upper rooms. But yeah, let anybody know and we can get them to them. We also got another order of about 15 of these. We were out. So if you want one of those. We also have 2 of the, I feel like a vendor. You know, don't you? When I was a kid, if somebody tried to sell Avon or Tupperware after church, oh my, that was a sin. We have 2 of these.
And do you have any pampered chef? I was wanting to order.
And we have a bunch of these for your neighbor's good. So just they can just tell the office or email the office and we'll get them delivered. Books, we will mail books to some of our members are far away, and we've mailed some out to some people who are far away. And the upper rooms are here, the ones that Chris hasn't delivered. So if you know somebody that's missing their upper room, we will do that. We are putting these on our YouTube channel so that if it starts to rain, we want you to just take your stuff and go to your car. The chairs are okay, they will wipe down. The guys will grab the equipment, and we will finish, if Charlotte has not finished teaching, the teaching part of this, we will take it inside and finish recording her so that we can still put that up on the YouTube channel. And Ann Kirshner is putting that link into your e-newsletter every Friday. So if you're not comfortable keying into our YouTube channel, just click that link in the e-newsletter and it'll take you right to the sessions.
I did that and it was fabulous. It was seamless and the recording was so good. You could hear everybody, so kudos to you guys over there. It really, top notch, really.
And Charlotte and I are working on the fact that that's being recorded, and we need to be careful that we are not giving out personal information like I did about Jerry last week. And so, Eric, thank you for going in and editing that out. So if we stop and pause when we're giving a story, we're trying to be careful and respectful of the fact that it's going out there, and we don't want to do
Don't
that.
pick your nose or anything.
Right,
Well, we
right,
can.
right,
We have
right,
masks on.
Stop.
Don't touch your face.
So the plan is teaching first, questions second, and we decided the best thing to do if you have questions is to send them by email to the main computer, to the Mac Cobb at Mac Brethren. And we have set up a file. We just get those and drop them into the file. Francis and Jean Hendricks are doing this with us from afar, from Minnesota, and they watched the delayed, and Francis gave me a whole raft of questions after he watched. So that's where we're at. Any questions?
Suggestion. When people talk, remove your mask so people can hear better.
Hey. Did you hear that?
Is that what you just did?
Yeah, remove your mask when you talk so people can hear better.
Remove your mask.
That's when you're talking. Take it in. I got it.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started, and I'm going to try and not be distracted by these clouds that are moving in. Today we're going to be talking about chapter 2, which is on anxiety and reactivity. And I would like to start by saying that in manageable amounts, anxiety can motivate both individuals and systems to change. There's a potential for transformation. There's a trauma therapist by the name of John Briere who talks about the idea of the therapeutic window when he's working with clients. And basically what that means is that you have to generate enough emotion to get people in a space to be able to work on things and to change. If you don't do anything, people undershoot that window. And if you push too hard, if you generate too much emotion, people kind of go up over the top of that window. And so I think it's the same with anxiety, that a certain amount allows us to move forward. It provides us energy. The book talks about the difference between acute and chronic anxiety. With acute anxiety, we recover. It's situational. Chronic anxiety tends to be more habitual and free-floating. When you think about the coronavirus right now, I think it has elements of both. That certainly, on one hand, the coronavirus is an acute situational event, but I think the lines between acute and chronic anxiety gets to be a little murky because the coronavirus impinges on so many different aspects of our lives. You know, social, economic, it's bringing more social inequality to the forefront. There's this kind of sense, this free-floating sense of what's going to happen next. And I think that's kind of more of a chronic sort of stressor. To say a little more about chronic anxiety, and again, this is in the book, that chronically anxious people, the more chronically anxious you are, the more likely you are to focus on others and others' weaknesses. Also, chronically anxious people have more difficulty tolerating differences and have a lower threshold for emotional pain. The book talks about this vicious cycle of anxiety, reactivity, rigidity, polarization, and more anxiety. And that one feeds on the next, and it just really gets to be a vicious cycle. You look at how that gets played out in society today. Murray Bowen, who was the developer of Bowen family systems theory, before he died, right around, it was in the late 1900s. Right before the turn of this century, he developed the idea of societal regression and looking at how anxiety works in societies. And his theory, and again, this was before the year 2000, before September 11th and all the changes that we have had, that his theory was that our society was regressing. And I would encourage you to look up more on his ideas about societal regression. I think it's pretty interesting. One reason anxiety is so difficult to manage is related to how our brains have evolved. This chapter presents Paul Mclean's theory of brain evolution. Paul Mclean was a physician and neuroscientist who spent his career pretty much between Yale Medical School and the National Institutes of Mental Health. And he theorized that our brain really evolved in three parts based upon our brain anatomy. The deepest part around our brain stem is called the reptilian brain. This is the automatic pilot. It allows for quick action without thinking. And you can imagine how necessary that was for early ancestors, our early ancestors, to move if you saw a lion coming towards you. It's what kicks in if we just respond without thinking to protect ourselves, jumping out of the way of a bus or those kinds of quick thinking. Next is the mammalian brain, which is our limbic system. That's kind of there. If this is the reptilian part of our brain, this is the mammalian brain. And the mammalian brain is the house of emotion. That's what this author calls it. And last is our neocortex, or our thinking cap. And the neocortex actually compromises about 85% of our total brain volume. Mclean theorized that there were good neural connections between our reptilian and mammalian brains, those parts of our brain, but given the fact that the neocortex evolved relatively rapidly, there are poorer connections between our thinking cap and the lower sections of our brain. Brain structure, I think, has real implications even for how we cope with the coronavirus. This week, there was an article, I believe it was on the NBC website, that I thought was very timely for this Sunday school class, that where two psychologists, one was from the University of Iowa and the other was from the University of Kentucky, and talking about brain structure and brain evolution and how that contributes to how we cope right now. They talked about the reptilian brain as focusing on immediate consequences. They used the phrase, the fierce urgency of now. That's kind of what guides the reptilian brain. And it's also responsible for more impulsive behaviors. I think about, maybe this just happens to me, nobody else, but I'll see a box of donuts at work. Somebody brings donuts. And I think, okay, I don't need this, I don't need the calories, I don't need the sugar, and I'm not gonna have a donut. Well, the next thing I know, I'm eating a donut. And that is my reptilian brain saying, hey, eat this now, you don't know if there's gonna be food later.
There's never going to be a donut again.
Yeah, there may never
I
be
know
a donut again. In this article, they talked about how it's our upper brain structures that allow us to think about delayed consequences. And they also, similar to, I think, what Mclean's saying, say that we evolved to weigh the immediate and the future unequally. It's kind of like when there's a threat, it's our reptilian brain that is still the default. And this causes a phenomenon that they call delayed discounting, which basically means delayed consequences are cognitively discounted compared to immediate consequences. This contributes to lack of planning for a pandemic that experts have been talking about the possibility of for years, and planning towards this has been pretty hit and miss. Also, this contributes to this drive to get back to normal now. You know, we want to get back to normal, even though the more we do actually extends how long we have to live abnormally. And I'd be happy to share the link for that article afterwards if you're interested. Oh, before it rains, I really want to talk about Jonah, the book of Jonah. I think Jonah as a character exemplifies Mclean's idea of the triune brain and how our behavior is influenced by different parts of our brain. I have to admit, even though it's only 4 chapters, I'm not sure I had ever read Jonah in its entirety until I took Old Testament at Bethany. And I discovered I really loved it. I think of it like a really good British comedy. God tells Jonah to go prophesy to Nineveh. Instead, he runs away, the flight response. And I should say the flight or fight response can be a response to either real or imagined threat. In this case, based upon what we know about the Ninevites, Jonah had reason to be afraid. They were pretty barbaric. But anyway, runs away, hops on a ship, and then he falls asleep during a big scary storm. And trauma researchers would say that there's actually, besides fight or flight, that response, there's another automatic response called freezing. And one aspect of freezing is actually sleeping at really crazy times. It's considered the equivalent of freezing. Basically, his reptilian brain was guiding his actions. So he ends up being chucked overboard, is in the big fish, he prays, God tells the fish to cough him up, and he ends up going to Nineveh, he prophesies, and he converts the entire city of 120,000 people, plus animals, it says. So he converted a lot of people and animals. But Jonah ends up being mad because, and from the text, it looks like he's mad because God wasn't going to punish the Ninevites after all, even though they changed their ways. So he goes and he pouts outside the city. God gives him a bush for shade. Then Jonah's happy. Then the bush dies. Then Jonah is mad again. So this is all mammalian brain. And to me, the ultimate irony is, if Jonah could have put on his thinking cap, he would have realized he was probably one of the most effective evangelists of all time. Right?
Right.
120,000 people and animals.
And animals.
Yeah. And I guess I wonder if the moral of the story is, if God can work through Jonah, he can certainly work through, he or she can certainly work through anybody. Another example from Brethren history, I think, of the thinking cap not coming out on top is related to the Goshen statement. And I'll give a little background on this. Historically, we know the Church of the Brethren took their peace position very seriously. In 1848, even annual conference established a set of baptismal vows that included promising to refrain from the conformity to the world, swearing oaths, and from the use of violence against humans. That was in Brethren baptismal vows. And during the Civil War, a member of the Church of the Brethren would lose their church membership if they participated in the military. Looking at some of Don Dernbaugh's material, at the beginning of World War I, those baptismal vows were still being used, basically. Brethren were asked if they accepted the peace witness. With World War I, the Church of the Brethren Peace Witness was up against the context of a nationalistic fervor, suspiciousness of people with German origins, and a draft conscription for the first time. And the government's attitude was to draft everyone and then ask questions later, try and sort out who the conscientious objectors might be. The penalties for refusing to participate were very strict. Some of you who went to McPherson College, David, maybe had Maurice Hess as a professor. He had left by then. Maurice Hess was an old order brethren who I believe was an English professor. Does anybody know? Yeah. Here at the college for a number of years, and he was one that refused to participate in the draft. And he was in prison. And initially, his sentence was life imprisonment for refusing to participate in the draft. That's how strict it was. There were people who refused to participate who were killed, or the prison conditions were really bad. And so first, Maurice Hess was given a life sentence, then they changed it to 25 years. Then, at the end of 1919, they let him go. My mother was a student secretary for him part of the time that she was at McPherson College. And I asked her one time if he ever talked about his experiences, and she said that he really didn't. So to continue discussion of the Goshen Statement, in January of 2018, a special conference was called in Goshen, Indiana, attended by 400 brethren. They adopted the Goshen Statement, which among other things said, and I quote, "We believe that war or any participation in war is wrong and entirely incompatible with the spirit, example, and teachings of Jesus Christ." So this was a very strong statement. And in the statement, it specifically recommended the brethren refrain from wearing any kind of military uniform. Sections of this statement were then printed and distributed through congregations to young men who were facing the draft. In July of 1918, 2 brethren were summoned by the War Department and told they would be charged with treason with a penalty of 20 years in prison and or a $10,000 fine. And these were 2 men who were instrumental in developing the Goshen Statement. They consulted with 2 other brethren leaders and abruptly withdrew this statement. And you think about the long-term ramifications of that in terms of where the Church of the Brethren has gone with what appears to be a very watered-down peace witness. I think this is an example of fear ruling out over principle, over that thinking cap. I would like to just make a few general concluding remarks. One is that even though we talk about the importance of using our thinking cap, that systems theory is not anti-emotion by any means. It more is related to the goal of being able to choose rather than letting our emotions run amok or totally dictate our actions without any involvement of higher brain function. Creativity, in fact, is a link between emotion and reason, and we'll be talking more about that next week. It's hard, though, to be creative when we're anxious. That's mentioned in the book, that when we're too anxious, we really can't be imaginative about possibilities. And the important thing is to bring anxious patterns to the light That's the first step in being able to change those patterns. What we will do this week is, because of the rain, you can submit any questions or comments you have by email. And next week we will be looking at chapter 3 in the book. Thank you.